everyone, and great to see a great attendance on this webinar. It's great. This is actually the first time that we get all our productivity forums together. And I would like to take this opportunity also to thank you for your support to the productivity forums. It's a critical part of what the Productivity Institute does. And we much appreciate that you're giving some of your time to us, and we hope you continue to do so now that we're really getting in a more active mode of starting projects with our various productivity forums. Now, as Nicola said, today we have just a short meeting, but we thought it was very timely to have a meeting. Actually, it's incredibly timely given the fact that we're actually facing a huge rail strike today, which I think is just a reflection of a lot of pressures that businesses and organizations more broadly at the moment are facing. So we're in this certainly in this aftermath of COVID, of the COVID pandemic. We're facing cost increases, we're facing supply chain disruption, we're facing labor shortages, and all organizations that many of you represent are facing these challenges one way or another. And of course, the way to think about it is that you become very short term and try to think about what is it that we can actually do right now at this moment in time. And quite often the easy way, not easy, but the obvious answer then is, we have to reduce on resources, we have to create more efficiency, we may have to lay off people. But we do think that actually more genuine productivity gains can also be helpful at this point in time. So we thought it was useful to spend an hour together to really go through what are the current pressures, but also what kind of role can productivity play in this respect. And the way we're going to do this in the next hour is that I have two of our RPF members that have kindly agreed to join me in a bit of a conversation to start up the conversation, but then we're going to invite in your comments, and I'll explain in a minute how we're going to do this. But first, let me introduce our two RPF members that are joining us today. First of all, Sarah Tulip. Sarah is the co-chair of our Northeast and Yorkshire and Humber Forum. She's currently Senior Director at Cognizant, which is a large information technology services and consulting company. But she has lots of other roles. She's very passionate and a champion of women and girls in digital. And as part of that, she's co-founder of several organizations. Wild Digital, which is Women in Leads Digital, is one organization she's a co-founder of. She's a co-founder of Digit-L. She's a digital ambassador for Leeds City Council, and many, many other roles. But in her role, she can definitely talk about what the role of digital could be in the current pressure we're facing. So thank you, Sarah, for joining us today. It's great to have you on. And then our second speaker or panelist, I would say, today is Barry Leahey. Barry is the CEO of Playdale Playgrounds. Playdale Playgrounds is a playground design, manufacturing, installation company based in Haverwaith in Cumbria. And Barry has been the CEO there since 2015. Barry also has multiple other roles. It would take the whole hour to explain all those roles, but among other things, he's a non-executive director of the Cumbria Chamber of Commerce, and he has various positions at the University of Lancaster Management School and Cumbria University in areas of entrepreneurship, leadership, and strategy. And he is a member of our Northwest Productivity Forum. And I should say, finally, also a co-founder of Be the Business, which is one of our strategic partners. So again, also Barry, thank you for joining us. So with that, let's start right away. And Sarah, maybe I can start with you to really ask you a little bit, what are the pressures that you're currently seeing in your own organization, but also the many organizations that you are advising? How are they being perceived? How is the pressure being felt, and how is it playing out in practice?
Okay, so I guess that when it comes down to technology and digital, the thing that always comes up is skills and pressures around skills. It's always the big thing, and it's always the thing that is holding a lot of organizations back at the moment from a perspective of being able to do the things that they want to do. For me, my personal journey at the moment is for Cognizant. I was hired to set up a Northern Delivery Center, and I've got 3 years to hire 1,000 people. So that's my personal big challenge at the moment, because I've got to hire 1,000 technical people in a city where it's already quite competitive for skills, and it is across the north, and maybe it's not as saturated as London. So, for me at the moment, looking at that challenge specifically, what I have said is that one in 5 people that I'm going to hire is going to be about developing new skills. Yeah. So actually looking and thinking about how do we bring in new people to our industry, talking about returners, reskilling, and not just trying to, solve the problem with the same people and moving people around. And I think as well, as a global organization, it's not particularly responsible to move into a city and try and take everybody else's staff. I don't think it's particularly responsible or particularly ethical. So, for us, skills, and I think for our clients, is a huge thing, and actually why maybe a lot of our clients are leaning on us at the moment, because talking about, come back to it, productivity, automation, transformation, all those things, that it takes specific skill set and abilities and capabilities, and you can't do it without either a really strategic, capable partner, or bringing those skills in yourself, which are very, very hard to find and train.
And I was just going to ask, in this tight labor market, one of the pressures that I mentioned, can you still find them, even in a place like Leeds, where you say maybe a little easier than in London, but digital skills are hard to get at the moment. So how do companies go about it? To actually, do they do more in-home training? Are they sort of more relying on each other and building networks and things like that?
Well, I think you have to have different strategies to do this, right? So if you just rely on going out and recruiting in the market in the same pool, you're going to struggle. So you have to think a little bit more clever about it. And previously, organizations would say, I want somebody with 5 to 10 years experience. Well, actually, I think people are starting to realize, just because you've only done this for 2 years doesn't mean you can be really, really good at it, right? You might not have some of the life experience around it. So starting to think about how, we bring in junior people and we accelerate them. But also, I think what's become very, very important, Bart, is that people are looking at retraining into digital. Because if you've spent 10 years in commercial banking, right, and want to move into digital and you retrain, why would a bank not want to hire you? Because you understand their stacks and infrastructure and how it works. So from a perspective of actually now thinking about, okay, they were a lawyer, but they want to become a developer, or they want to become a scrum master, it's actually thinking about how we use the skills already in our workforces, retrain them, and build, experts. And I think that's going to be one of the big things that's going to be really important.
So one question before we go to Barry, one question here in the chat is that to what extent does remote and flexible working really help at this point in time?
Yeah, so I think it's super interesting, and it's super interesting because I think that actually I've been looking at when I'm building my office. I'm not building a desk for everybody, right? I've done a lot of looking at this, and I'm going to have 1 in 5. So you'll have one day a desk a week tops, right? From a perspective of people will be on client side, they will be home. That, like if somebody's working on client side for us, they may only come in the office once a month for a touch point, right? So about the jobs being remote, I'm reading it. Yeah, loads of them will be remote. But there may be a point where we might say that you need to be in the office to come for a quarterly thing or something like that. Or if you were international, maybe not. But the reason I guess Cognizant is doing that is that they've got a huge workforce out in India. And this probably gives a little bit of framing around it, is there's like 450,000 people work for Cognizant in India, right? That's a huge population. And if you think about what happened during COVID, people have slightly different feelings about outsourcing to India purely. And actually, if you look what's going on in Eastern Europe, people have slightly different feelings about what's going on there and outsourcing there. So you can say these jobs are remote, but it's not remote there in India, and it's not remote there in Eastern Europe. They would be UK jobs that would be remote, because actually a lot of suppliers are interested in where those people are based from a safety, a sort of economic perspective. So yes, there will be a lot of remote stuff in there, but actually still within the UK.
Yeah, right. Well, the questions coming in, and you can see the chat as well, so we may pick up a few. But Barry, I first want to go to you, because it's great to have you both on, because you're representing very different types of organizations. You're a manufacturing firm. Remote work is possible to some extent, but to a limited extent. I think you are, correct me if I'm wrong, I think you're facing some other immediate pressures, like cost increases in your materials, for example, supply chain disruptions that you may be facing. So can you talk a little bit about how the pressures are sort of coming your way at the moment?
Yeah, hi everyone. We're very similar in what Sarah was saying, very, very similar, but we're the other ends of the spectrum. So, I spend a lot of time with SMEs, and Playdale's very much an SME with just over 100 in our manufacturing plants, plus obviously the support staff around there. And I think we've got to be very, very careful and put my productivity hat on, really, is is to be aware of noise. And currently there is a lot of noise around supply chain disruption, and there's a lot of noise around people, and there's a lot of noise around skills. I believe those issues have been there probably for 20 years. Okay, some are more highlighted at the moment. Supply chain, we've got Shanghai port that's hitting right as we speak. It's, you know, there's the Ukraine, Russia impact on the supply chains. But dynamic SMEs should be able, or any businesses, you know, will have people that should be managing that and have, you know, a horizon of events that hopefully can reduce that. But there's a lot of noise around it. I think where we're struggling the most at the moment, immediately, is around culture, which is a little, you know, which is very much related to skills. All right, it's great. I mean, it was Admiral by yourself about to say it, but we're based in Haverfordwest. You know, hands up of the 100 people online right now that have heard of Haverfordwest. You know, we're a half a horse town in South Cumbria, near the, you know, the shores of Lake Windermere. So we've always had to train our staff, which is a great, you know, agile environment to be in. We don't buy skills in. We haven't got a skill shortage. We've got a people shortage. So when you get them, you've got to want to develop them. And we're very much noticing, I think that people get productivity more, but I believe work ethic and the want and the desire, rather than, you know, what we talk about out there. So there's a little bit of a culture mix going in there as well. You know, there's people skills very much so, but it's the what do I want to do mix.
So what I find interesting about both of you actually saying is that even though we're sort of, you know, and I'll ask you in a minute whether you think we're heading into a recession, but, you know, there's a lot of talk out there in the media, and the first thing you think about in a recession is, you know, how can I lay off people? But both of you started talking about retaining people, right? And that seems to be the big pressure. The retaining the people with the right digital skills, or retaining people just in generally, right? So this retention, it also comes up in the question, to what extent that is an important way to do. So Barry, maybe you can talk a little bit about what are you specifically doing in that space of retaining people, and maybe Sarah can comment on that in a minute.
Yeah, no, listen, that's huge for us. And that is one of those noises that's been highlighted, and rightly so, you know, recently. You know, the Great British Resignation that was supposed to be last year, but has carried on to this year, has seen a fluid market in an overemployment almost in the area. So we have to become the employer choice. I've just come straight from a board meeting. We had a big chunk of time this morning discussing on retention of staff. What are those little benefits that we're going to give to compete? You know, we've got a BAE down the road that will offer X, Y, and Z. Our benefits package we've just analysed is actually, we believe, is better. You know, because we're constantly adding in these small things that we can do around health and healthcare, around, you know, right to work, and regarding, you know, we offer free parking, and we are offering, you know, buses to get people here, you know, we've just been talking about, and things like that, of this added benefit with the fuel shortages, and those immediate quick wins that we can get, that people see their pound in their pocket today, is what we've been talking about. But it's also bigger than that. We've got a big all-site, all-staff day on July the 7th. We've got everyone together to have fun and to understand what our values are, and bake our values into that workforce. So it's trying to embed people into our culture, and then also give them some quick wins, possibly in their pocket, but also how they feel about the business.
Yeah. Sarah, any comments from you on the sort of retaining and culture issue that comes up? It comes in the questions as well, so everybody seems to be really concerned about this at this point.
Yeah, so it's a huge issue across the digital industry, huge issue, because many different reasons. I think one of the things that Barry was sort of talking about at the end is not having a common goal. And actually, there are tech companies that work 100% remote, right, and have done for years. WordPress, the company owns WordPress, they're 100% remote. They have been for a number of years, and they don't have a retention problem because they were built that way. They were designed that way. They understand how to communicate the culture, and they understand by design that they are that type of organization. If I think about my previous employer, they were an organization that was built on face-to-face relationships, and everybody went to the pub and everybody came to the office, and we had pizza and we did those things. And that was a really difficult time for that organization, because they didn't know how to, the way that they communicated naturally didn't happen. So I think that, you know, a lot of people now are saying, oh, get me back in the office, get them here, get that. You can't necessarily do that. You have to think about what are the ways to communicate with people. How do they feel a sense of belonging? How do they have fun, as you said, Barry? And you have to think about, you know, modern ways to do that alongside getting people back in the office and doing those face-to-face things. But I think you need to think about it in several ways. And again, there's that, you know, the salary thing. You know, that a company, I could be living in Leeds, I could be working for a New York tech company, and I could get a 50% pay rise. So it's not competing on 5-10%. It could be double salaries, and that's very, very hard. I think, you know, if you're somebody with a child, or, you know, you have responsibilities to say no to those things as well. So I think the globalization of the job market has created so much opportunity, and I think that employers have to know this is an employer-led market. You don't control this. You have to think about, you know, like, you know, how can you be attractive to employees?
Yeah.
Just jump in, you know, and I think it's relevant or highlighting one of the areas that we've really jumped on, and that is, and it's not a term I like using, but the middle management. Yeah, where your senior management team are often very well developed, often know what the strategy is and how to develop people below them. The middle managers are often your accidental managers, or traditionally in SMEs have been. And I think, you know, Playdale were guilty of it. We're piling training into those areas, because we think, you know, they're pivotal on the retention of people. And if people don't see their development, or they can't converse with that manager, you know, they are going to leave, especially if they're offered, you know, 10% or 50% more. So we see that as a real sticky point that we can really develop. It's not necessarily the staff's development, which we are doing, but we're really highlighting that middle management development, because I think it's overlooked in the UK.
So one, and Sarah already mentioned it, and you mentioned it as well, Barry, is the rising, the pressure on wages, and that, you know, you will have to raise wages in this kind of tighter labor market. Is this a pressure that you see very widespread, or do you see it in particular skill areas? So is that become so sort of, you know, ubiquitous that you say you overall just have to raise wages wherever you can, or are there particular skill areas where you think this needs to be focused on? Barry, you want to start, and then Sarah?
Well, the geography, I believe, matters on this, and where you're based, or what, you know, hub or development area you're in, really. And we're down the road from a shipbuilding yard that employs, you know, several thousand fabricators. Well, guess what? If they get a new contract, they pull our fabricators out of our factory for an extra £1 an hour. So we've actually got that. But where last year it was digital skills internally and keeping people on the graphic side, etc. But this year it's very much what's happened in the local geography. So it's across the board, I think, would be the actual main, but it's highlighting in specific things at specific times. And we've just got to be the ability to jump quickly, and benchmark is how we handle it. You know, we go away and we get as much benchmarking data as we can to make sure that we're always just about right.
Yeah. Sarah, across the board or specific areas like digital skills, is there a geography component for you as well, as Barry argues?
There is actually. I think what's quite interesting is that Cognizant initially looked at the business case for Leeds about 6-7 months ago. They put it together, and we did some salary benchmarking, and the salaries against London, and they've gone up in Leeds against about 10% in the last 6-7 months. So that is a huge shift, and it's interesting because there are positives to that as well, because we talk about leveling up and you know, and people having a better quality of life, and it shows that if we keep growing, you know, and we become a digital hub in the north, and we're getting paid more. That's really cool. But what it also shows as well, it's quite challenging when you're building business cases for organizations to move to the north. So, you know, like a lot of large businesses have said we're going to move to the north because of access to skills and all those sort of things. So I think there's becoming a thinner line there that will also attract industry here.
Yeah. So a couple of interesting questions online here, and maybe we can sort of take them through. Also, if people do want to make a comment in person, then as Michelle asked, you should just start your chat with speak, and then we can open up your line. But you can also just put it in the chat, and we'll try to deal with them as much as we can. So one is obviously the topic of the day is the rail strike, which really goes into this question of, you know, to what extent transport infrastructure is becoming an increasingly large pressure, not just rail, but more generally, also roads and everything. Is the system really systematically broken? to what extent, is the shift to remote and doing more remote in terms of work actually going to help us to deal with some of those pressures. So can both of you comment a little bit on that? You're both from the north also, so in that sense we have facing somewhat different pressure in the south, but we face them in the south as well. Sarah, you want to start on this one?
I mean, I only really talk from personal experience around, infrastructure, what I experience day to day. It's not a huge part of my industry or what I do. I know that Henry Morrison is on here, who probably has a very solid opinion on this, which would be useful to hear from. But from my perspective, the thing that I find the most difficult around northern infrastructure is I drove through Bradford yesterday, and what's happened to Bradford and how it's fallen behind as a city, because it doesn't have basic infrastructure. So when we're talking about the difference between southern and northern infrastructure, I think the difference is huge. We are way behind in the north. We're not starting from an even place. We're not asking for even the same investment at the moment. And from my perspective, I find it particularly, I suppose the word is unfair, but I'm not there to get deep into that, but I'm sure, Henry wanted to speak. There you go. Yeah. He knows a lot about this stuff.
Yeah, so Barry, Richard has a comment here as well, which I find quite useful to bring into this conversation as well. The large investments going on in the north, which are potentially disruptive. We're starting to establish labor forces in tight markets, like gigafactories, Amazon distribution centers, the government economic hub in Darlington. So are these kind of positive investments, and how can we manage them to lead to better outcomes? You want to take that into account in your comment as well?
Yeah, listen, they're all great investments, but we don't want them to be token gestures that we can just highlight. I was with the Treasury officials last week, and the lady I was with, one of the ladies who says, "Oh, I've just spent a few days in Darlington," and made a great big point of telling me, and she says, we've got 40 of our staff there now, out of whatever 1,000 of staff. Let's be real. If we are going to level up, we've got to have equal pound coming up there in the infrastructure side of things. And it's, it takes me over 2 hours to drive through the county of Cumbria, and I'm talking that I haven't got access to people. If we're going to innovate, if we're going to move on, if we're going to become more productive, I've got to have access to a workforce to start with. And if we can't get here, then it's very, very difficult for a manufacturing company. So we've got so far to go. And what hasn't been mentioned yet in any of these discussions is the global picture. We argue about, UK leveling up. Guys, we are light years behind other countries. I'm lucky enough, we've developed Playdale into 51 countries now. I spend a lot of time in places like South Korea and Beijing, and they've moved from 1950 infrastructure to 2050 infrastructure, which is easier to do when you don't have that infrastructure. Obviously, we've got to do an awful lot of change. But what I see, I guess, is the missed opportunity, which I think people don't really get. We make do, don't we? We just get on with it. And unless you've seen what the art of the possible is, and I don't actually know if London's got it, so rather than, we get carried away about saying they've got more than we have, I don't think any of us have got where we actually need it to be to compete on a global scale. And that's what it comes down to at the end of all of this. All the noise goes, how do we compete on a global scale? How do we become, and that's what's made Playdale more productive and more agile in our thinking and our culture, is when we entered that global market. And we want to export a way out of a recession, which, you're saying, is it coming, is it not? Well, if we're going to get to 1 trillion of exports per annum, then we've got to have infrastructure to be able to move and react quickly. And that's all, aiding us. And if we're not productive, we're not competitively priced, and, we're wasting our time.
Yeah. Well, before we, and actually we're already talking a little bit about solutions, obviously, but I want to come to the productivity issue in a bit more detail later. But before we do that, I want to pick up on Ben's question, which is on the view that you guys have on the 4-day week kind of thing, or the 40 hours over 7 days kind of thing. Are those things to actually get things moving a little bit, make it easier for people? But then also Anne-Marie has a question about how do we compete for workforce for skills without access to good housing, health, childcare, and education, right? Which are these really longer term issues that we can't resolve overnight. So again, what is it that we can do short term to make it easier, and what are the investments that we need to make sure that we are kind of more resilient longer term? Sarah, do you want to start?
Yeah, I think so. I guess for me, I can say, yeah, you can work flexible, and there's a lot more flexibility built into a contract in a digital organization where we're very remote. I imagine, Barry, you can't have the same sort of flexibility because it's working, like on scale, so it's different. But I think what's interesting is that second point around, how can we do that without access to housing, health, childcare, and education? And at the moment, I find it very hard, morally and emotionally, because at the moment people can't pay for food and they can't pay their energy bills, and there are people who are currently in good paid work, and are eating from food banks. So how do we then approach people and say, you should be retraining, you should be reskilling, and actually people are living hand to mouth. So I absolutely agree that there is a bigger issue around that, and I think at the minute, we might talk about it a little bit, but the cost of living crisis in the UK is not helping productivity, because people are just about staying alive. So for me, that is my biggest, concern about what's happening right now. So how do we compete for workforce skills? I don't know, but what we can do, and I think what is important from my perspective, and the things that I personally try and do, is to get into communities and take role models who've come from those communities and show the art of the possible. And if you can start, helping people show that if you retrain, you could be earning double what you're earning now, you could create better lifestyles, but it's really hard to get into those communities, and it's really hard to break those cycles because people are living in such tough circumstances. So I do see that a lot across Yorkshire and the North.
Yeah, so very flexible working practices, 4-day week, be more flexible in letting people work when they need. Is that going to be a real help at this point in time to deal with some of the labor pressures that you're facing, to make that a little bit easier for people?
Well, I'll answer it in two ways. One was to answer your previous, though, really about, what can we do in the short term? Well, we've tried some of those in the short term, and we tried those 18 months ago. But what we've got in the short term is a long-term plan. And I think that help everyone, actually, and including the government of where we're going, and we can discuss that more, I'm sure. But, short-termism, I think, is what works against a lot of people. I think, and again, if you're digital and you can be based at home, and someone like WordPress who's done it from the beginning, but I think, flexible working or working from home has almost been a failed experiment that was forced upon us, and I'd love to see the data that's come back to it, because, a lot of people are seeing this improved productivity back in the office. But what we did probably 18 months ago was to go to a 4-day week in our manufacturing. And we went in there with, all the whistles and bells and the reasons why, and everyone on board. And there was, celebrations, and there was 6 months consultations. And then we started it, and we were feeding back, and we desperately wanted to make it work. We were about 10% less efficient and productive. All right. And we were feeding back. And again, I think it came down to culture, to see, 70 or 300 businesses is part of the trial now going forward. I hope it works. I hope it works for them all. But, we've been there, and we've thrown an awful lot of energy at it. And unfortunately, I think it comes down to culture. And we're not as maybe driven or as understanding as other cultures around the world of what it means. And I think it's because we've put other benefits in, or I just think we've got used to working in a certain gear in the UK. And I'm just worried that we all think, things like a flexible working or a 4-day week is the answer. And it isn't for everybody. During the pandemic and people working from home, I had as many people begging me, could they work from the office, as I had people begging me, could they not come into the office? Because we're all different, we're all wired up different, and things affect people.
Well, I was just going to say,
so that is flexible, but when we're doing sweeping short-termisms, like, oh, everyone can work from home. Yeah. Well, you 50%, 50%, it might help.
But a lot of the culture comments that both of you are making do come down to a flexible model and take into account what it is that individuals need. And that's quite different between different types of workers, right? So for some people that 4-day a week may work, for other people it totally doesn't. For some people it works to work from home, for others it doesn't. So it seems to me very challenging for management to actually deal with those very different ways that people want to work and then put that into an organizational framework that works for you as a business leader. Anyone of you want to come in?
I'd like to come in on that, because I believe that actually, if you look at the working week was probably built for a man. It was probably built for a man who had support at home. It was probably built for a man of a certain stature, and it was built with something in mind, right? And they would only need so much holiday, and they would come into an office on those days. And so for me, I don't believe that the employment contracts that most organizations use is actually appropriate for a diverse and workforce and to create equality, because lots and lots of people cannot live up to the employment contract as you see it now, right? They cannot live up to that because they're a mum and they have to pick up their kids at certain times, because they have caring responsibilities, because they want to work 3 days a week and not 5 days a week. And that's the problem, is that actually they're going to need 40 days holiday, but the time they're there, they're going to be really committed, and they want to do a longer day on a Tuesday, and they want to do those things. And some people would like to work evenings. So the problem is, if you go back to the employment contracts, it will only work for a certain group of people. Right. So is it time? And I think somebody said it in the chat, it's about a person first way of employment, and you can do that. Yeah. I have a friend who works in cybersecurity. She's a female, and she's put her advert out as part-time, right? And she got these amazing people. They were like, oh, I can only do 3 days because I'm writing this book at the moment, and it's this global thought. Even like, wow, she was getting these people, but just because we offered flexibility. Yeah. So I think, you talk about flexible working, 4 days, that's good for some people. All these things are good for some people. It's about what is good for, how do you build a human-centric workforce?
So Barry, as a business leader, as a manager, can you handle that? Because that's a different way of thinking and running your workforce than many managers have done over the past decades.
Yeah,
and learned to do.
I think because of what's been forced upon us, because of where we are geographically, we've had to trial a lot of that. We've got a very high percentage of part-time workers. We've got a huge percentage of returning mums coming back to work, etc., which is us being flexible. All right. However, I also know the inefficiency it gives us when you're in an SME and the single points of failure. And, and in big organizations, I think you can span those points of failure. In smaller organizations, the more flexible you are, the tougher your job you have of spanning those points of failure. And, and a lot of businesses are running very lean at this moment in time. So, running lean and being flexible is a really difficult juggling act in a lot of businesses. And it's just where we're at. And I'm going back to my culture thing about the UK. It's, you're right about the model, all right? Same as you're right about, it would be about the same about the tax system. They're all last century type models, all right? But unless we get a global surge in this, we can change all of this, but we'll probably find that if the rest of the world doesn't change, we're not going to be very competitive. And it's about doing it at the right time and not just piling into one thing because we believe it's right, but we don't have any businesses.
Okay, so let's switch the conversation a little bit now. And again, we're sort of naturally moving into that. So a little bit to solutions, because so we're being told, and as an economist, I think it's probably right that we're probably heading into something that's called a recession. It might be just, 2 quarters of negative growth, and it might not be as painful as the 2008-09 crisis, let's hope so, or the 2020, God forbid, but it will still be very tough time ahead given the pressures. And the easy thing that you have to do as a business leader then is say, where can I get my gains, my efficiency gains now? Because I cannot afford, it sounds great, this long-term investment in productivity, but, look, I need to keep my head above water at this point in time. So I want to hear from each of you how you balancing these short-term pressures that will only increase over the coming months versus keeping that long-term focus. You mentioned culture, and I'm sure you'll mention it again, but I'd like you to get a bit more concrete about, if I'm a business under pressure now, to keep things going with rising prices, with having a hard time to find people, and with a potential really bad market ahead of me. How do I stay focused, Sarah?
Okay, so little thoughts around that, I guess, is that we've been through recessions before. We've just been through a really difficult couple of years with COVID. I think a couple of things that I would be thinking about, right, is there's the opportunity right now to think about it and take, like, do something now, take action immediately. What is your plan? Thinking about what revenue streams are going to be affected. Thinking about automation. There may need to be some technology investment at the moment that can help with acceleration, because if you still need to deliver those numbers, but you can't do it with that workforce, and you need to cut things, how can you accelerate through technology and automation projects? I think it's a good opportunity if you can. People were committed to some big office footprints, so thinking about actually location, scale. Do you need to be in those city centres? Actually, a lot of employees would love an office in the suburbs. So, can you be thinking about doing things differently from that perspective? I think one of the really big things to think about right now is, as organizations hitting a recession with debt, I think there were a lot of businesses who borrowed and took advantage of loans over the last 2 years. And right now, I think I'd be thinking about, reductions and management around, can you sustain another hit? What does that look like? How do we manage finance? I guess they're the key things that come to mind from my perspective.
Very.
Yeah, slightly different angle of answering it, I guess, is we're data driven, all right, and we reassess that data, well, daily, if not by the minute. All right, we've got real-time boards up in manufacturing, so we know where we need to be, and we make sure we communicate, where we used to keep people in the dark and then tell them a month after the event that it wasn't good enough. Now everything's real-time feedback, and the same is with the planning from the top is where we used to do annual budgets, we're doing now quarterly budgets for 12 months in advance. So we're seeing stuff on the horizon, and we're doing that by analysing the previous 12 months data, and we're looking at, to granular level what's happening in the market and getting as much feedback as possible. And then we're doing that in the middle of so we then set those actual operating plans. And then twice a week we get the whole of the management teams together, and they report on their numbers, but they don't talk historical, they talk solutions. And again, that was a change in culture, that it's what do we need to do to get to that endpoint that we've now set ourselves. And that's when you start to see the ideas flow and the innovation and of all the things that Sarah mentioned, that we become more flexible. All right, and then we get it to the teams, and we make sure that that's communicated to the teams, and we ask them for their feedback and their ideas, and we give £25 for anyone that comes up with an idea that's implemented, which we didn't think was a lot, and it can be done tax-free, but we create this culture of continuous improvement, and it's took us years to get to it, but we could get a couple a week now. And it's just about this communication and that then bridges these short-termism. Yes, there's a curveball that 4 people are off with COVID in a manufacturing cell. That's something that needs to be managed there and then. Yeah, but we're getting better at responding to that because we're cross-skilling people and moving people. So I think it's about data, managing it by data, and just being ready and filtering out the noise.
Yeah. So Sarah, from the COVID crisis, where we did a lot on digital, what is kind of the most important thing that we learned during the COVID crisis that we can use now? I mean, Barry gives a great example of using data using it much more continuously for management. Would you add to that anything that you think that we really can use now to get through this next problems that we're facing?
So I think Barry's, running his business through data and understanding what's happening now is the greatest way to be able to innovate, because, if you've got a single customer view, if you understand, who's buying what, when people are buying things, you can make such quick decisions. And that's if you look at the organizations in retail, in any industry, the ones that are innovating are data-driven businesses. And they get that now, and they understand that they're a tech business that, a lot of organizations are a tech business that sell things. And have an e-commerce front arm. So I think that, that will particularly, I think, not to put a dampener or a gloom against it, is I think that what has happened is that all industries have digitized, and, retail's a huge one. but they've digitalized, and that could be accountancy firms, that could be legal firms, and it's not just the big players that are doing that. There are lots of startups, scale-ups, SMEs who are coming into marketplaces and disrupting. And I think that, you know, I'm not saying this is something that needs to do, but I think it's something to be aware of, is there are more and more disruptors as access to technology becomes easier. That, you know, like you can build applications now using low code. So I don't know, Barry, me and you afterwards could go and build a low code Microsoft application, and we could do something with it, right? And we could build, you know, we can do those sort of things together if we've got an idea. And so people who couldn't do things before because they, you know, who had big ideas but didn't have accessibility, tech is becoming more accessible. And so I think that people need to really think about, is their business leading and innovating? Because if, you know, they've kind of fallen behind in the last 2 years, this next year or so is going to get even harder. So, you know, be thinking about the disruption, be thinking not just about what you're doing, but what your competitors are doing, and actually what the disruptors and innovators are doing. So
what is the quickest way to catch up? Is that collaborating more with other firms, being more active in your supply chain? You know, what are the best practices around there now?
Yeah, there's lots of different ways, isn't there? There is building ecosystems. I think, you know, understanding, working with partners as well. You know, like if you're an organization of a certain size, you've probably got some really good vendors around you. So you've probably got, you know, AWS, you've probably got Microsoft in there, you might have ServiceNow, you might have, you know, Salesforce. Start, you know, like asking questions. What are people doing? You know, what can we do next? How do we partner? People will come and help you, and people will come and innovate with you. And, you know, probably if you're doing something that's really cool and innovative, you can claim it back anyway, you know, against R&D. So, you know, like I think, make sure that you are innovating right now, because if you're not innovating, I think somebody else is innovating in your space.
Yeah. Barry, what is the big thing you're doing now to weather the next storm?
Building partnerships. Sarah just mentioned the word partner. You know, surely we've all learned that. I'd like to think the majority of people learned that during COVID, you know, collaboration, we all didn't have to reinvent the wheel. And I think a lot of, you know, we're very insular. We're working our silos in businesses, and I'd like to think over the last couple of years, we've learned that collaboration and partnerships work and help you get to that endpoint quicker. So, you know, we're just continually building our network. We're continually getting out there. You know, it's not just about Barry getting out there and working on the business. I want people within the business working on the business and not working in the day-to-day. And I'm pushing people out all the time, out of their comfort zone, into networks, and they come back, and it's third-party validation, isn't it? That the idea that Barry had, that everyone rolled their eyes on because someone down the road said it was great, it's now amazing, and we should implement it. And it's just the art of collaboration. It gets you from A to B quicker, and that's what everyone needs to be doing.
Yeah. By the way, again, great comments there in the chat. So if you haven't opened your chat, then definitely do that, because there's a lot that we can discuss given the time, but it's incredibly valuable. So thank you for making those comments. But continuing a little bit on the collaboration thing, which obviously is important, the partnerships. Let's talk about government now. So, you know, we read and complain about government all the time, but where can government really help at this point? Where can government help us to benefit most? Where can we benefit most from government at this point in time, Sarah?
It's interesting, isn't it? Because like I saw recently, Rishi has said that he's got a plan to turbocharge productivity through an investment of capital, people, and ideas.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I think, you know, what I feel like is, if you've got a plan, you need to share this plan, right? And we need to understand what this plan is, because I don't think anybody sees that plan at the moment or feels confident in that the government is actually doing that. And there's been a huge amount of talk. And right now, things aren't particularly getting better. Things seem to be getting worse around us. I think it's interesting around when we talk about local government. I think that local government understands its people much better than national government. And I would love to see more collaboration or more devolution of power and funds to local governments in order to do more. You know, the money that was given around council tax, you know, it's just, local council sort it, you know, and actually, you know, like asking local councils what's the best for their people in their region. So I would love to see more happen from a perspective of listening to local government and not national government making decisions that are affecting the North, I think, in a bad way and not supporting an understanding way. I think the divide between two is huge at the moment. So my thing is, well, okay, if you've got a plan, let's share the plan, or let's input into the plan. Where are you speaking to industry? Where are these roundtables? Where are you taking input from us? How is this happening? How can you make a decision that is good for me and my business if you don't engage with me?
Yeah. So Barry, I know that you spend time in Westminster as well as at local government. So at this point in time, of course, we'll say government needs to help us wherever they can. But at this point, should I focus on really sort of short-term fiscal things like do something about taxes and things like that? Or is it really, as Sarah is arguing, important for them to get much more involved at the local and a regional level and work with businesses to build those partnerships?
Yeah. Okay. Well, devolution has to happen. That it's just a given. But government also has the same problems we have in business. All right. They have a skills shortage. So if we can attract more people into government that have the skills to actually engage and empower people via devolution, then we're on to a winner as well. But like I said, the short-termism everyone should take is to create a long-term goal. And I've seen numerous charts in the last few weeks. Saw a fantastic presentation by Andy Haldane. I think it was out of Manchester a few weeks ago, and he talked about GVA since 1900 and against other countries and our 4 or 5 year cycle and how we just see it bouncing around. We've got to have a plan put in place, and we've got to then stick to that plan and then communicate it, but we don't need to overcomplicate it, and we just need to ask them to create some noise for us. Business can do the rest if they can create the interest. We got out there during COVID, didn't we, about hands, face, space, and 3 little words. Well, wouldn't it be great if we could have productivity, efficiency, and something else going out there? That the government just get that message out there that then can create ambition and can drive people to actually be interested in digital skills or to help us build that plan. I'm sure as business people, give us the tools, give us the basics, we can actually do the delivering. So, if we can devolve and we can get the money into the regions, I think you'll find the groundswell actually does it. And we just need, I don't know, some transparent leadership, which may be just lacking skills.
Yeah. So we have about, go ahead, Sarah.
Mm-hmm. I was just going to say, you were talking about attracting people to come and work for the government. I'm not sure people are that attracted to that.
Yeah. So we have about 10 minutes left. So if people want to speak, you can do that now. Please do just say speak and in the chat, and then we can open your line. We'd like to hear from you. Although we also love your comments. So that's great as well. So yeah, I was going to ask, what I find interesting actually about both of your comments is that, I think lots of people, and I have the same thing, if you follow the media, it really looks very, very gloomy. Well, you're both very entrepreneurial. So, if you're an entrepreneur, you can't afford to be gloomy, but you still need to sort of go against the tide and really sort of motivate your workforce to continue to stay positive and try to resolve the pressures that you're facing. So how are you doing that during these times? Because I'm sure that, workers will say, look, this is going to look bad and it could be the end of my job and things like that. So again, it goes back to the culture thing. How do you keep your workforce motivated and not feel like, okay, they're going to squeeze even more out of me in these cost efficiency drives that we're definitely going to face in the next few months?
Well, we keep communicating, we over communicate. We've got social media channels just inside the business where we talk about the fun and the good times, but also deliver the bad messages as well and not try to hide them, and we, the town hall meetings that we have and all that kind of stuff. But it's about communicating. And just going back to the government piece and just putting some real stuff on it, Sage have recently started running TV adverts at primetime TV regarding what they can do for customers, but they talk about accountancy software and just so happen to have their logo there. The government could do the same to inspire people. What you just said, then you've got 2 individuals online that are passionate about it. If we can just communicate that passion out there, and maybe it can be over the tipping point of gloom. We can't start to be a nation of glass half full, not half empty, and that's what we try to do. Just keep trying to. Positivity, negativity drags everyone else down.
Yeah. Sarah.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I'm about to create 1,000 jobs. So we're talking about, you know, redundancies and people losing jobs. And actually, we're going to create lots of jobs and need to hire lots and lots of people. So I guess, you know, a good conversation is thinking about, you know, like retraining, developing, that there are opportunities for people. You know, I think if I had been made, e.g., if I'd been made redundant in lockdown, I would have retrained as a software developer and got a job for 35 grand, right, all day long, and I'd be there for 2-3 years and I'd be earning 50,000-60,000 pounds. There is opportunities for people. So I feel like one of the things, and maybe at a government level, at a national level, this is a time where technology will still need people. We will still need technologists. So I feel like, is there a way that we make sure that people within our organizations, if they are not going to be able to move forward, if we are cutting, you know, weight out of organizations, what can we do as a nation, what can we do as a region to make sure that we're still creating roles and not creating more unemployment, which is going to take the country further under? How do we quickly do something now that is going to help us create more employment?
But there's this big mismatch, right? So you're creating 1,000 jobs. At the same time, there are 1,000 people, also are 1,000 people out there who actually want a job. But a lot of people will say the match is just wrong. I mean, you know, to get them up to the level of the basic skills they need to get the jobs that you actually want to create is really hard. So again, and that's a long-term investment, and we need a better education system and everything else. But what is it that you do now at the moment to make sure that you resolve this mismatch and get people on track where you want them to be as quickly as possible? Sarah, you want to start, and then Barry wants to make a comment.
Barry, you were going to say something, you speak.
Yeah, okay, just really the government's role in it. Yeah, at the moment, a lot of the hot topics are, you know, do we change the apprenticeship system? Do we change the R&D tax credits? Where, you know what, for smaller businesses, they're windfalls. They help, but they don't stoke the fire. And if we could just move from, you know, saving people on tax, or super deductions has been spoke about an awful lot as well. You know, that's great, getting 130% on 19% or whatever it is. You know, it's not actually that big a number. But if we could stoke it under the fire and put it at the front end, you know, we started to play with things like digital vouchers, haven't we, with the Help to Grow. You've got to, you know, I think you can use 2 vendors or something like that. But, you know, if we can, we're a nation, and I go back to culture, that likes a nice shiny voucher. How do we get the world moving? Well, let's promote the world. We all got given vouchers to eat in cafes 2 years ago, and everyone started to eat out, didn't they? You know, if we can front load it rather than work on things that help you once you've made money, I think the SME community would start to move. We'd start to develop and start to innovate. You know, if we had innovation vouchers or productivity vouchers, the government, I think that would be a solution to actually start to get us in, you know, in transit.
Sarah?
You know, I was deeply listening to Barry and thinking about what he was saying, and I do think that the government needs to move fast on it. I do think that it's a national issue. It's not something that's going to hit pockets, and I think the SME, you know, the SME community are going to be hit really hard. I mentioned earlier, you know, if they've taken on debt, it's not even going to be about, you know, cutting costs. It's going to be about companies going under. So I think that conversation is even more difficult to have at the moment. And I was talking to a local council and a LEP about that recently, and saying, you know, we know the businesses who are going to fold around here, and we're trying to find ways to keep them going. So I think there are, I think Barry's, you know, thought around a national intervention and being able to motivate that way is super interesting. But I do think that I want to hear something soon, and I want to know what it looks like. And, you know, I want it to move forward.
Yeah, we've got 2 minutes left, and I know you're people pressured for time. If you have a little bit of time left, please stay on for a bit. We'll open up the line so people can talk to each other and make some introductions. But I want to give each of you sort of another sort of 45, 60 seconds to basically make your main pitch about the most important takeaway in sort of weathering the storm as a business leader. What would you say? What's the most important way to stay focused on that longer term, which is where we have the real productivity gains, but not lose track of the pressure we're facing right now? Barry?
Simple. Know your numbers and communicate with your people. You know, it's management by walking around, but it's also management by data and spreadsheets. You know, it'll tell you the truth. It'll strip out the noise.
Sarah?
Yeah, both excellent answers. I think, you know, the other thing is to, I guess, you know, I guess the other thing really is around the innovation and technology, and what I mentioned earlier is that sitting still, if you continue to sit still during this time and hold tight, things won't move forward. If you want to hold on to your business, you need to be thinking about innovation, and you need to be thinking about automation, and you need to be, you know, to move forward. Don't just try and stand still, because that won't work.
Yeah. Can I just jump on the back of that, because I'm something I'm passionate about. Even if you're moving forward slower than all your competitors around the world, we're already going backwards. And we keep saying, and it's promoted at government level, that we did 3 months of productivity gain. We did 3 years of productivity gains in 3 months. We can't be naive and think that Germany didn't do the same, and China and everywhere else while they were locked down. You know, the world is moving at a pace, and we've just got to get up to speed. We've got to get fit for business.
Totally agree.
Yeah, well, great comments. An hour is done within minutes, it looks like. So Sarah and Barry, thank you so much for doing this. And again, if you have a bit of time to stay on, please do so. Also, other people are going to open up your line, and now maybe we're going to do this a bit more often, because I really love it to hear our Productivity Forum members talk to each other and hear from each other. So we're probably going to do this a bit more frequently if the team is okay with that. But thanks for joining us now. This ends the official part of our RPF forum. And we're going to open up the line for people who can stay on for a little bit more. But otherwise, great to see you. Thank you also for making all these comments online, which were fantastic and very informative. And we will hope to see you all again. And if not before the summer, then surely after, and enjoy the warm weather, and hope we get a little bit more of that over the next few weeks and months. Thank you.